Africa is still not ready or not able to find its space on the slippery terrain of survival.
Survivalism and sustainability, uncovering new layers of art practice. In 2020, we remember what happened that year. Nothing happened globally. We all sat back at home. I've never been so tense in my entire life. That was a peculiar year. But in 2021, Art Incubator got back to life. And in Lord's Academy, again, I was invited for an exhibition. It was an interesting exhibition. So imagine exhibiting in a secondary school. Imagine exhibiting in a primary school. Imagine exhibiting in a high-end hotel, a social space within town. It means that we're trying to reach out to all that would be interested in arts from the formative years to the years that we consume art at all levels. When you begin to compartmentalize art, when you create strict borders, you seem to squeeze realities into small clusters. And then sometimes you can even uproot them from situational contexts. That is what we do when we overlimit ourselves to clusters of art. This one studied painting. The other one studied sculpture. The other one is in poetry. This one is in theater and so forth. So I advocated that knowledge domains must integrate. And in that integration, we ignite creativity because you are giving the artist a wider latitude to express himself. So let's enlarge the space. That's what I said way back in 2019. And that's going to be, in fact, the capsule of the discussion this morning. I look at the significance of the incubator from three perspectives. This is where startups are conceptualized. This is where ideas are nurtured. And here too, we deconstruct traditional notions of existence. That really is what creativity is about. If you are used to doing a given thing in a particular way, and then you change, you want to apply a new approach towards realizing a different effect that would still be consumable by your target audience, that is deconstructing traditional notions, and that is part of the function of incubator. Now, Seno and Singer extended the idea of incubation in this book. And they talked about innovation using this concept of age of chaos, which has been defined as the estuary region where rigid order and random chaos meet and generate high levels of adaptation, complexity, and creativity. I'll explain. Estuary, that is where the river meets the sea. The river comes with a kind of sweeping current and enters the sea, which is already turbulent. And that is the age of chaos that Seno and Singer are talking about, and so much can happen, which they have reduced to what they call adaptation. In that turbulence, you adapt. We belong to a peculiar performance space, a peculiar practice space. I'm talking about Nigeria. And because of the peculiarity, we have to reorder the way we approach practice. I was inspired by the words of Chinua Achebe in Things Fall Apart, where one of the characters, actually a bird, Eneke, said that since men have learned to shoot without missing, that he has also learned to fly without perching. That is where we found ourselves in Nigeria. The socio-economic terrain keeps changing. And it is time for us now to begin to learn how to fly without perching. Many people have described Nigeria as a failed state. Perhaps the foremost of which, maybe because of our domain of operation being in the academia, is the fact that schools have been closed, universities have been closed. Then religion and ethnicity, or tribalism if you like, have become triggers of war. Of course, we know about infrastructural collapse, and the social system has become a trap. You cannot sleep with your eyes closed. You cannot move through Nigerian roads because you do not exactly know what to expect within that space. That is exactly what Nigeria has become. The center point of Nigeria's failure is corruption. If we were doing it right, probably we would not have found ourselves in this situation. And many academics have affirmed that. One of the strongest manifestations of corruption is economic instability, economic decay. And we have seen this manifesting in many ways. The cascading exchange rate, there's high inflation, high rate of unemployment, and many other things associated with economic instability, economic decay. And what this has caused is to make people to reorder their priorities. And I tell you, art does not come high in the priorities now. But if you look closely at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we need is food, basically. We need clothing, and we need shelter. Anchor this discussion on certain theories, certain concepts, and one of which is survivalism. Flashback to the title. It's the preppers approach. And the agenda is actually a situation where people prepare ahead of time. Individuals or groups proactively prepare for emergencies. And those emergencies could come in diverse forms. The second concept that I chose to guide this discussion is the concept of sustainability, which is the ability to maintain and support a process continuously over a period of time. And three central concepts underline sustainability. The first being economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. In realigning art and maybe locating art practice, considering the turbulent times, considering the uncertain times where we are now, there are certain things we need to consider. We have to assess the economic capital. That is to say, you'll also be looking at your demand and supply profile, because as long as that does not happen, there's no transaction. Part of what you do in realigning and locating art practice is also to assess your own social capital, which consists of the network of allied professionals and skill sets that you need to support your practice. In art, sometimes we do not work alone, even though quite many of us work in solitude. And then you look at the prospects for expansion and sustainability. We've talked about sustainability before, but here we are looking at a profession that must not die. So within a given locale, within a given locality, what have you seen within the locality that indicates that this profession will sustain within this terrain? You look at the production material supply channel, because if you lack the raw materials to support your practice, this practice will die. So what's the future of this practice? So you analyze your raw material base. And finally, you also look at the people's aesthetic inclination, because it will profit you nothing if you manufacture the materials or the items that you do in the art, and then the people do not even understand you in the first place. And even when they understand you, even when they have this eyes for arts, even when they are attracted to arts, what happens is that there's usually a kind of art that a given set of people would prefer to the other available options. So what type of arts do they like in a given environment? We begin with ceramics. Is there any ceramic artist in the house? Is there any ceramist in the house? Even if there's none, at least I know that we have three-dimensional artists within the house. And if we do, let's look at what ceramists have been doing over time. Over time, we know that ceramics using clay, they produce dinnerwares, decor for homes and public spaces. They do flower vases, some items like the pictures that we have seen on the screen. Now, these are the traditional products of ceramists. And in the coming exhibition, we'll be expecting many ceramists to come out with some of these things that they are traditionally known for producing. But beyond this, let's align our thoughts to the alien needs, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we looked at. The sociological needs, and one of which was shelter. People need sanitary ways for their homes. So we have to see the innovation that we can put in ceramics that will produce sanitary wares for the toilets, kitchen sinks, tiles for the floor, and so forth. We also have another area of specialty in the arts, graphic design, and we know what graphic designers do. Traditionally, we know graphic designers for the roles that I have listed on the screen, screen printing, design, printing of billboards, and so forth. In fact, when we grew up, we thought all graphic designers do was to write signboard. But if you grow up to understand art and appreciate art very well, you'll know that signage is not just signboard. It's an art that defines a complex. It's an art that gives you direction within a city. And it's done with certain aesthetics that would even make that city appealing. Now, these are traditional rules. In fact, they even go up to publishing, paste-up, lithography. We are conversant with this rule. When we studied graphics in school, it was about cardboard paper. They would tell us to stretch our cardboard in a way that you'll not find any bubble. Madam Emekwe, do you remember Unicross? From the stretching, they will begin to assess you. But as I grew up and to this age, I noticed that there was a drastic migration to the screen. So the graphic artist must also migrate to the screen. But among the array of specialties within the arts, we discovered that the graphic artist is so needed in the contemporary economic, social, diverse cultures across the globe. Can we think of how to also exhibit the things that we do on infographics? The alternative to this presentation would have been to do a big poster, and I'll be speaking to the points on the poster. A graphic designer could help us to accomplish that. Let us deconstruct the boundaries. Let's see how the graphic artist can go into film editing. What we see as visual designers is far more sophisticated. In animation, I know that animation, particularly in the domain of advertising, is in hot demand. Full-scale printing. I know that one of us here is, in fact, two of us here, seated here in this audience, are already doing full-scale printing using large and small format. It's about survival. It's about survival. Traditionally, we know textile designers to be producers of adire, batik fabrics, and I've seen a lot of tapestry in the University of Cross River State, former CRUTEC. But we could also expand theater design deeper into the area of fashion. Flashback to our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people have to wear clothes. Luckily, in Nigeria, we do not just wear clothes, we wear fanciful clothes. We also have costumes for festivals. Carnival is around the corner, and I know that many of us do so much in carnivals. The textile designer can go into interior decor for events. Interior, I'm attaching this function to the textile designer because if you look at many interiors, there's a function next door. If you go to that interior, you'll see that many of the items used for decoration are fabrics. And then finally, the textile designer can consider going into rug carpet tufting, rug carpet production. We use carpets in our living rooms. We use carpets in our bedrooms. At the foot of the bed, we have carpets. We even use rug carpet products on top of the tables. We also have painting, and that is my domain. Traditionally in painting, we do 2Ds for interiors and exteriors and so forth. Generally, I think we are the hardest hit because of what is happening in the world of photography. People don't even stop to consider what paintings look like again. Because of the kind of enlightenment, because of the aesthetic consciousness we have within our spaces, we are having difficulties. In that primary status, there are some other things that we do, since maybe the purchasing power may not be much within the audience, among the people that we're working for. What we do is to produce prints. There are machines that can print art, machines that can reproduce art, to the extent that if it was rendered as impasto, they'll see the paste of paint. Apart from our traditional functions, we can go into decor for events. I know because of our knowledge of colors and color relationship, we can do very well in interior decoration. Decor is generally interior and exterior. We can dabble into makeup arts. We can do interiors. I've talked about interiors. Most importantly, architectural interiors and exteriors. We go into paint production. My PhD was on paint production. And I know that if there's anything that is still very highly in demand, again, tie this, by the way, continue to flash back to our reference to the physiological needs in Abraham Maslow scale. It's about finishing the architectural, your shelter, buy and also learn how to manufacture your paint. And consult a graphic artist, discuss branding. You can also have your paint manufacturing line and bring them and exhibit. We also do paint. We also do everything when it comes to painting. That is the spirit, because you remember our reference quotation, if the hunters have learned to shoot without missing, can't we also learn to fly without pitching? That's the survival skill. The sculptor, you don't get any problem because these people are everywhere. We know them to be molders. Look at what Erasmus has turned this entire hotel to. He doesn't have any problem. Traditionally, we know what they do. They carve the mold. Those are the traditional, and they do a lot of metal casting. But the sculptor has taken over the architectural space recently by what he does and what he could do. Beginning from the interior. He does the kind of seats that you're sitting on now. He does flower pots for the interior as well as the exterior. He does wrought iron pieces around the architectural space. And from a deeper perspective in architecture, he does metal doors and gates. Have you seen in your neighborhood the new houses that are cropping up? Go back again to Abraham Maslow. No matter how difficult the times are, people will still look for shelter. We have to build patronage by bringing more people to understand and to buy art, to subscribe to art. It starts by exposing them. So what we do in SNA Calabar is to take art to the children. They are the future of arts, because when they understand at that level, it gets to a level where they'll have the resources to patronize art. So with that background understanding, the patronage of art in their days when they're in control would be very high. Previously, I have noted that art was the exclusive of those in the upper echelon. Recently, the Queen died, the Queen of England died, and I watched a documentary on her art collection. It is breathtaking. Part of what we do in democratizing art is to begin to use the items that would help us in that process. And one of which is what happens in the internet. And we'll talk a lot more about this shortly. Art is a viable foreign exchange earner. Sometimes you could sell one work, $300, $500, multiply that by 720 as at today or thereabout, then you'll understand the value of the dollars and the need to step outside Nigeria, by all means, to also sell art. Collaborate with foreign institutions, and there are many of such foreign institutions. Art conferences and workshops, some of them are published. CAA International, sponsored by Getty Foundation, sponsors every year many artists to the US just to go and attend conferences and workshops. Go for exchange programs. There are some universities, luckily many of us are in the academia, there are some universities that will open their doors to engage you from Africa to hear from the African perspective your own narrative of your artistic experience. And then there's something I have noticed that people in the West love, charity. If you say that you're offering anything to charity, you'll be given some very high recognition. So if you do a kind of exhibition for charity, something tells me that submitting your papers at the embassy for visa, and you're saying you are going to do a show for charity, so that whatever rakings you have from that show, you'll use it to support charity, something tells me that that kind of visa will be a ride, a smooth ride. Adjoining arts in foreign and intervention development programs. Traditionally, we have been using personal contact for sales. Who did this art for you? Oh, one boy in Krutech. And then you meet the boy from Krutech and he does another one. That's personal contact. And we also do art exhibitions such that is done by Art Incubator here in Calabar and elsewhere, some other groups. But now we engage in new arts marketing where we are looking at alternative options where we show our presence online. So at this point, I'll appeal to the controllers of Art Incubator to see how we can establish an online version of our exhibition. I think it makes sense. We also have portals within the internet that help us to market easily. Many of us are regulars on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and so forth, but what do we do? It's not about showing wedding photographs and church clothes. Do you also put some of the products of your work? I know one of my lecturers in Uyo, Best shows you from the process of painting to the end product, and he tells me that before he even finishes painting, that the painting is bought. That is the power of this environment, the web environment. And we'll move straight to NFTs. It's a new way of marketing art. Maybe not so new anymore. But I've captured some vital information on NFT. Because many artists have migrated to this domain, non-fungible token, to sell their art. It's non-fungible because whatever you put in that virtual space does not have a regular price tag. If you pick $1, for instance, $1 is $1 everywhere in Africa, in America, but an NFT, once you mint an NFT, you can mint your painting, mint your sculpture, mint your tweet, or anything. That's creating NFTs, technically called minting. Now, once you do that, you call the price. Now, the price stays based on the power of bargain. That's why they call it non-fungible token, because there's no definite price tag. And it has this resale value. So let's see how we can begin to use some of these virtual platforms. Yes, we have actual artworks. There could be sculptures like this, but not everybody would have access to actual sculptures. If we mint them as NFTs, and they have some kind of production story base, or what we call iconography, it would help to heighten the value of that which we produce and put in the visual space. Sometimes, if you do not want your work, maybe you buy and you want to terminate the existence of that work in that virtual domain, what you do is technically called burning. You burn your work. That means you take it away from that virtual space and nobody can access that digital wallet anymore. So what I've said so far is that while we bask in our actual domain, we should also be conscious of the virtual domain and the multiple things that we can do. Some Nigerians are doing that. Osinachi Igwe is perhaps the most prominent NFT artist from Nigeria. He started that art in 2017. At the first stage of my conclusion, I want to charge us artists to see how we can begin to spread our investments. We have made so much money from sculpture, from painting, from textiles, from ceramics, but have you thought of putting your money elsewhere so that that money will also work for you from another dimension? And I've listed some of the options here, from real estate, logistics, transportation. Some people are proficient in managing certain of the ventures. Some of the ventures I have listed here. But have you thought of pushing your money into some of these ventures? It will get to a time you do not have both the mental, creative, and the physical energy that you now have. What have you done in preparation for that future? Put your money where your money will continue to work for you. I think this is self-explanatory. At the second level of my conclusion, I want to emphasize again that we should deconstruct borders. Let's note that over time, art has never been static. There has always been a need to adjust approaches. I have discussed a situation where art was a matter of the courts earlier on. Now it has gone to the streets, and we're still trying to push it further. So we'll continue to deconstruct boundaries. Part of what I wrote in that work I did for Borderless sometime in 2019 was an advocacy for seamless, borderless engagement. And I also called for deconstruction of, here where the constructions are, the mental domain. Deconstruct your mental domain, your psychological domain, your cultural domain, and you also deconstruct your structural, creative, and other borders, other domains that seem to restrict you within a cocoon. We need to look outside and see how we can restrict that inclusivity that specializations cause us to stick to. We must adjust both our conceptual and expressive approaches to remain afloat under the current creative economy. Our products and exhibitions must reflect the times. Thank you very much.